Welcome to the Strap and Link podcast, where we cover brands from their inception to their latest release.
It's the Montress Tudor.
Like I said, better movement, spring drive
So,
potentially, Rolex Oyster Perpetual.
There's Super Ocean Heritage. Now you see this kind of renaissance of Tudor. Finally, in 2016, they achieved the spring drive with an 8-day power. The podcast for watch lovers by watch lovers. New episodes every first and third Monday of the month.
So, hello, welcome back, everybody, to the Strap and Link podcast. It's been a long time. It's been like three weeks or something.
Yeah.
Two at least. Yeah, 3. It's been a minute.
Been a nice little break to start the new year. We were running like chickens with our head cut off at the end of the year and to begin this year with a great January set of episodes. So we are excited to bring back a even better February with another kind of cult classic watch brand. I mean, this is another one of those brands that I feel like if you don't know a lot about them, they're great pilot's watch. This is probably the quintessential pilot watch out there on the market today. And so if you don't know much about IWC, it'd be great. It would be a great episode for you to learn a little bit, and you'll see why so many of the athletes and actors that sponsored by this watch love it so much.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I was curious to get your take on something. I've seen a lot of news lately about small watches being released. Brands that are like coming back with like the Tissot PRX, for example, right? Came out with a 40 and then they came out with a 35. And then like the Oris, I believe, is it like there's an Oris Diver 65, I think, that recently released in 36 millimeter. There's been a lot of like 36, 35, some 37 millimeter watches. So, I didn't mean to like shift the subject too much, but I did just want to just bring that up and ask you, like, are you a fan generally of that? Because I find that kind of weird. Like, I've never put on a 36 millimeter watch and been like, oh yeah, I like that. It feels like it fits right and well, and I want to use that dimension.
I think it's just everything's ebbing and flowing, and just the way people wear watches now. When I was growing up, and and when I was growing up, everything has always been growing, size after size. You hear about uncles and parents and stuff. They're like, man, when I wore a watch, I wore a 34 millimeter and I thought it was huge.
Yeah.
What the heck? And then now everybody wears a 40 millimeter, 41 millimeter. And now I think we're starting to finally see that shift back down a little bit, maybe not to 34, but we're seeing it definitely to 36 to 39, which, a 36 millimeter to me is very small. But there are a lot of people we talk to. One of our friends at Mayors, he loves the 36 to 39 range. And I know you're in that 39 range, where I used to not even like 39. I was always a 41, 42, but now I've kind of shifted back to where, okay, now I'm more of a 40, 39, 40 millimeter guy myself.
Yeah. I definitely don't mind it on like a dress watch, and even, it's not that I don't mind like a 39, 38, but again, like my only take on it was just that, like, I've tried some of these because again, there's so many of them that come out. They tend to be a little bit cheaper. So like if they do fit you, I assume that that's a plus, right? That you get it for, I don't know, 50 or $100 less. But like I tried a Tissot PRX 35 on a month or two ago, and I put it on and it felt so incredibly small to me that it was the first and the only time really that I've ever thought,
lot of
why do
women
people want these size watches? Because I just tried it, and I don't have a big, I'm 5'11", 160, 170, and like that felt incredibly tiny on me. So I feel like it was just, again, my perspective, but I'm like, how small do you got to be for that thing to feel substantial?
Yeah. Me and you have around the same wrist size. We share watches and don't have to change them out. But
very nice.
But I'm the same way. I wonder, now I could be completely making this up. You tell me. Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that during the craze, the Rolex craze of 2020, 2021, the more accessible watches were their 36 millimeters? You think people got like, well, I'll just take whatever I can get, I'll take 36, and then they maybe fell in love with the 36 if they were looking that way, or
that kind of bolstered the market or something?
Kind of bolster. And I still think obviously it's not the craze right now where everybody's wanting that. It's still the 40, 41 millimeter, if anything's going to be the hardest thing to find. You can just tell by Rolex standards on, well, what's the easiest I can get? It's still going to be, you can easily get a women's size watch or a 36 millimeter. But we see that slight swing back in that direction, I think.
Yeah. Won't spend too much time on that topic. But I wanted to bring up another topic really quickly before we dive into IWC today. And that topic would be some upcoming episodes and just some kind of topics that David and I are thinking about doing and bringing to all of the listeners. And then also kind of a bit of like a podcast update. So kind of just start off with maybe the latter, right? Let's maybe talk about the podcast. You and I were just together up in the old mountains. We were sharing a cabin a couple weekends back, and we were talking about the podcast just from kind of a long term perspective, right? Coming up on our first year, it's been really really awesome. I mean, we started this thing. It was literally just like this idea of, hey, why don't we stop spending all of our like lunch, meetups and like happy hour chats about watches? Let's just buy a couple mics and turn a recorder on and share that with the rest of the world and see if people like it. And that's literally like how this podcast came to be. So, we're not personalities, we're not influencers, we don't have ad money, any kind of revenue like that behind this. And so, yeah, the discussion was just like, how far do we want to go with this? And, do we want to keep it at the same kind of level? Because I do think over the year, we've gotten substantially better, more comfortable with it. I think we've learned how to
Hmm.
edit things better, more
Yeah.
efficiently also. And I really do believe that the quality of what we provided everyone grew substantially and the listeners grew substantially. Again, we had 50 people that downloaded um, an episode in the first full month that we were up and running. 50. And and now that number is in the thousands.
Yeah.
but um but that was kind of the problem that we talked about, right? Was kind of sponsorship. And I think we both kind of had the idea in mind that receiving money and receiving ads was going to be fun one way or another. We talked about both of those paths, right? Like one is, you get, let's say 5 or 10 grand a year, and all that basically goes back into the podcast because, it does cost money. It's not a huge amount, but it does cost money to do this, right? There's equipment that you have to invest in. And then there's subscription fees for every service that we use, annual fees for a few of the things that we use. So, an amount like that would definitely go back into it. And then the other path is like, you blow up, right? And then it becomes like your second income or it takes over your primary income. So I think we both kind of decided that, and feel free to jump in or correct me anytime, but I think we both talked about, right, doing another 4 to 8 episodes, something like that in the current format, which is a very, sort of scholastic and like academic approach to
Very
horology and
detailed.
history.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, very detailed, to a little bit more of like a topical discussion that is basically just, hey, you free for an hour, flip the mic on. I've got this thing on my mind, let's just kind of
Yeah.
talk about it.
And honestly, I mean, we will do whatever, to an extent, whatever you guys want us to do. So definitely let us know what way you're leaning. We've talked about, one, sticking with exactly how we are. If everybody's like, hey man, this is what we love, this is what we want to keep listening to. So sticking with it that way. It's hard the more and more detailed we get these
Yeah.
episodes into, and we both working full-time jobs, plus getting loaner watches, plus getting interviews set up. But we want to hear from you guys. Or we've also thought about doing, like you said, a more topical list approach for an episode, maybe doing one
Hmm.
episode like this a month and one episode in like a list format of like top 10 watches, top 10 pilot watches, top 10 diver watches, what
Yep.
are our favorite brands, things like that. And then doing one episode like this and one episode like that. And because those episodes are just much more easy to quantify, and we can bang those out really anytime.
Hmm.
Or if you are saying, hey, well, maybe that's the direction we want the whole thing to go, and that becomes more popular than this, then maybe we shift it just to doing that. And I mean, there's a lot of open options. We're not obviously saying we're quitting this or nothing, but we're just exploring our options when it comes to
Yeah.
different formats, and maybe not just doing the same format every single episode. Obviously, we
Yeah.
love the interview episodes, but we can't just have 2 interviews a month for the rest of time. That would be even more hard work than what we're doing now because
Yeah.
of just getting schedules to line up. But definitely, again, tell us what you guys think. and what direction would you like the idea, or maybe just, hey, give us a chance on this one time, we'll do a list episode and we'll see how the reaction is and what you guys think. But
Yeah.
if we did start doing a list episode, I think we would get much more heavily active on YouTube, maybe even doing like a full video episode for that,
Hmm.
20, 30, 20-minute episode, and then putting up the full video on YouTube. So again, just tell us what you guys think, and if that's something you would be interested in.
Yeah, yeah, because David hit the nail on the head, but I just want to just emphasize this, one more time. It is really just simply just a time thing, really. I've got a 2 month old at home now. Again, David mentioned it, right? Full time jobs. David travels for work, so and I'm just actively moving around and traveling. There's a lot of things that happen on the side, and so again, just the very academic approach that we've taken thus far requires it requires effort and energy up front, and because we can't just come up here and just spew bullshit, right?
This is
It's
the fun part of the job. We love the
Yeah,
recording. Again, which is what we
yeah,
always talk
yeah,
about. Starting this was just more just for recording.
yes.
But with how popular, I mean, we've grown 1,000% listener
Oh,
views a
it's
month in
yeah,
less than a year. And so obviously the format we created with this history and everything we're doing, it has gotten very popular. But it was, it's not just us coming talking about it. But if this is again something where everybody's like, hey, this is the reason we listen, we love the history and this is it, then we will understand that and we'll respect that and probably continue to keep doing it this way. But we want to hear from you guys and you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
explore our options.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely, yeah, feel free to reach out to us if if you are a longtime listener, and if you do have thoughts on that, because another good point that you made is maybe that's something that people are more interested in. Obviously that's kind of up to us. I mean, it is
Hmm.
good to hear from people, but again, at the end of the day, it is our decision and responsibility to make an episode like that. So that's
Hmm.
it's not something that's hard to do. I mean, we could do a third episode in
Yeah.
February again, and
Just
I
see how it
just
plays.
yeah, and I just text David and just say, hey, I'm thinking about this, right? Let's maybe let's talk about the five best Submariner references ever released across the
Yeah.
history of the entire Submariner, right?
Yeah.
And we could do that, like David said, in 20 minutes, and then release it, that day or something.
I mean, we'd
Um,
love, top 5 Rolexes that are out right
yeah,
now. I mean,
yeah,
everything. There's
yeah.
a
And so something
endless
like that,
options.
yeah, exactly. And so something like that, that's what we've done in the past. Didn't garner as many listeners compared to the historical bits, and so that's why there is a discussion and decision to be made, because going back to these easier ones to kind of bang out means that you probably don't have as many listeners, so you're not going to get sponsorship. But I think at that point we would agree that that is totally fine, right? Because I
Yeah.
think we'd still want to do this.
No,
we
this is
just we
more
just
of
wouldn't
a
want to be
hobby, yeah.
burdened with the research and the out and basically just the man hours that go in to providing quality
Yeah.
from a research perspective. Still would be
Yeah.
quality, right? I mean, we'd still have to do some googling, and we'd have to obviously use our brains, right, to still pull off reference numbers and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just kind of where we are. So we'll I think David and I are going to give it some more thought. But to his point, DM us, reach out to us, let us know if you guys have like ideas, suggestions for anything that we just touched on. And again, we'll be coming out with some more episodes. We do have a Christopher Ward watch that is currently on loan. We have a C1 moon phase on the bracelet.
Yeah.
So I said before the sort of podcast update, we were going to give another update on episodes. So Chris Ward will be an episode for sure that we cover over the next four, um, probably in March.
Yeah.
I think we also talked about doing Omega,
Yeah.
and I
I
think
think
we could,
Omega is gonna be next.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna do an Omega part two, and we've talked about possibly doing like a James Bond list.
I think, yeah,
So
we're gonna specialize it more probably on the Seamaster side of things. Do a James Bond, talk about all the different movies and what watches were there, and that I believe will be our kind of 1 year anniversary special
yeah,
episode, right? Which will
yeah.
be end of February. Yeah,
First episode came out February the 19th.
so
Came
that'll
out
be
on
it. Yeah,
accident, kind of, because when you make your first podcast, you have to just like send it, and then it's kind of just like up to the services like Spotify and Apple to pick it up. So it could be picked up in like an hour, it could be a week.
yeah.
So you just gotta release it. That it's just one day it's there. So technically, yeah, the 19th. So yeah, that'll be our 1 year anniversary. We'll have to you know, I
Pop
don't
a
know.
toast.
I don't know. We'll
We'll
have to do
figure it
something.
out between
Yeah.
now and the
Do
next
something
time.
special. Yeah. You want to go ahead and jump into some IWC history? We've been at it for 15 minutes.
Yeah, let's talk about some IWC. Again, this is a very we always joke around about the pronunciation on a lot of these watches. This is one of the harder ones. This is a bunch of German names,
Yes.
and
Oh, the
we
Germans.
will talk about the great IWC watch again. This is something I've always just known about kind of in the background. I've never actively learned a lot about them until really this podcast episode. Again, when I was in the Bahamas in June, they had a big boutique of IWC, and I got to try on a bunch of them. Very cool watches. I've seen athletes again be sponsored by them. I'm a Patriots fan, so I knew Tom Brady always wore their watches back in the day. I'd heard of them, but I'd really not known much about the history. And these guys changed ownerships more than a sports team. These
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
bounce back and forth between guys. Going public, being private, being family. So it's a pretty interesting history. So let's jump into it.
Yep.
But in the mid 1800s, American engineer and watchmaker Florentine Aristo Jones, in a reverse of the American dream, kind of flew from America to Schaffhausen, Germany, and was inspired to create a watch company that would be directly powered and inspired by the Rhine's current. Thus, he founded the International Watch Company, and he planned to assemble watches in Switzerland and import them back to the United States. At the time, the Switzerland wages were fairly low to build watches, and they still had a tremendous supply of skilled watchmakers. And mainly, these were actually carried out of their house at the time. And in 1850, at the town of Schaffhausen was in danger of being left kind of behind in the industrial age. At this stage, watch manufacturer and industrialist Heinrich Moser built Schaffhausen's first hydroelectric plant and aided in further industrialization. Heinrich met F.A. Jones in Le Lacla, which again, when we first made that TISO episode, we did not know how integral Le Lacla was.
Look,
Yeah.
we practiced that so many. We should honestly release a bloopers episode one day.
Yeah, of
Or
just us figuring out this
oh my
dang city.
gosh.
We thought I'll never have to say this word again. Just got to get through
Yeah.
it once. This city is very tremendous in watch history.
Yes.
But anyway, so he met him in Le Lacla and showed great interest in his company. Together, they laid the foundations for the only watch manufacturers in the northeastern region of Switzerland. The brand was previously known as the International Watch Chronology before it became the name that we know today, the International Watch Company.
I also love that that's the name. Like
Yeah,
he was American and went to another country,
very
therefore making
simple.
it international. And they're like, "What do you want to name it?" And he's just like, "Watch, Watch Company." Wait, ooh, no, International Watch
International
Company.
Watch Company.
Yes,
Because
yes,
we're going from one country to the other.
yes. I love. It's
Which of
yeah,
course, and then I
so much
believe
creativity.
and during that time when he was wanting to import it back to the United States, he really hit a snag and really couldn't because the tariffs and all that the US was imposing on him.
Yeah,
So it really ended up not even
yeah.
working out as easily as he thought it would.
Yep. So in 1869, Mr. Jones rented the first factory in an industrial building, which was owned by the Moser family at the Rheinstrasse, which is near Berlin, and eventually having to rent additional rooms in the Oberhaus by 1874. The plans were already being made for basically a net new factory that was IWC's own. And a site was then purchased from Moser's hydroelectric company that David mentioned just a minute ago. In the spring of 1875, construction work was completed on the new factory, and 196 people began working in the 45-meter long factory. And this here says that could accommodate up to 300 workplaces back then by those standards, of course. Unfortunately, F.A. Jones had trouble selling watches in America due to those tariffs and different things like that David just alluded to. And by 1875, stockholders alleged that the company was on the verge of collapse. Jones scrambled to find new money, but that dried up, and the company eventually filed for bankruptcy. And Mr. F.A. Jones was then forced to relinquish control of IWC.
Yes, and here we go on the grand tour of different stockholders and owners. One of IWC's stockholders, Johann Rosenbach Vogel, CEO and a machine manufacturer from Schaffhausen, took the international Uhrenfabrik
Ooh.
in February of 1880. He purchased the company for 280,000 francs. Only a year after the sale, Johannes Rosenbach died. His son, Johannes Rosenbach Schenk, at age 25, took over and ran it successfully until his own death in 1905. So he actually died fairly young. Um, then at the time, Ars Hungai got to know the watch business in Switzerland and France. In 1883, he joined IWC and stayed with the company for 52 years. He was responsible for getting factory operations up and running smoothly and acquiring new customers at the time, which were desperately needed. He was also responsible for warding off prospects of outside interest to acquire an IWC in the interest of the Rosenbach family. But alas, after his death in 1905, his wife and two daughters and their husbands took over the watch factory and as an open trading company.
Oh
Around
boy.
the same time, they actually made the big transition from primarily having dress watches and being known for dress watches to what they stepped off into having pilot watches, which of course is what they're known for today.
God, I love hearing you pronounce these names. It's music to my ears. Oh, do you remember Jacquez?
I do remember Jacques.
That was a good one.
That
We
was
got to
that.
do a blooper episode.
Yeah, we got them. You just got to find them all. They're
Yeah. Oh,
buried.
yeah. No, just compile
Yeah.
them. All right. So moving into the 1950s. By now, IWC had begun solidifying their reputation for precision and quality in the watchmaking industry. Notable achievements during that time included the introduction of different models like the Ingenieur, designed for engineers, the word Ingenieur being French, with its anti-magnetic properties, and also the Portugieser, I believe, right? The
Yeah, that's it.
Portugieser Geezer.
That's their most popular
Mhm.
brand behind the pilot, the
Yep,
Mark.
yeah, the
Yep.
Mark, the big pilot.
Yep.
So yeah, so the Portugieser and Ingenieur lines launched in the 50s, and obviously both of those still a staple in the brand today, although it did take them quite a while to bring the Ingenieur back. But continuing on that innovation, they unveiled the first automatic movement, which featured a peloton winding system in the early 1950s. The 1960s also marked a pivotal time for them as they expanded additional horological influence by co-founding the Center for Electric Horology, or the Centre Electronique Horl. Yeah, I can do that. But the CEH in Switzerland. And if
Jacques.
you're yes, words. Um, and if you're keeping up with us and you're here in 1960s Center for Electronic Horology, should come as no surprise, rather, that they eventually, in collaboration, of course, developed the Beta 21 quartz wristwatch movement. That was showcased at the 1969 Industrial Fair in Basel. That also found home in several watches, including Omega Electro quartz models.
Mhm.
So again, we're seeing another company, despite the quartz crisis and people shifting to cheaper, largely, Asian made, digital watches. Another brand in IWC navigating that landscape. They also diversified their collection around this time by introducing ladies' watches with mechanical movements as well. And then finally, in the 70s, we witness a groundbreaking moment with the reintroduction, or I guess I want to call this like the second introduction of the IWC Ingenieur, originally released in 1955, but in the 1970s and 1976, actually, the same year as the Patek Philippe Nautilus. Thank you very
Mhm.
much. Famous watch designer Gerald Genta, again, designed, and then IWC reintroduced the Ingenieur. So, released against the backdrop of the quartz crisis, just like the AP Royal Oak, just like the Nautilus. So, similar to all of these other integrated steel sports watches of the 70s. So this watch also boasted anti-magnetic properties crucial for engineers and professionals working in magnetic field intensive environments. So as the name suggests, they are doing that, much like the Rolex Milgauss and several other brands. This showcased the brand's resilience during a challenging era for the Swiss watchmaking industry again. Now, kind of fast forward to today, and we will be talking about the Ingenieur in just a little bit. But yeah, definitely became a icon of precision for the brand. Um, and I was going to say one thing about the Ingenieur. So it's interesting that like people think of it in the 70s because it was the Gerald Genta version and it came out. So kind of funny that it came out along the Royal Oak and the Nautilus like in the same year by the
Yeah.
same designer.
Yeah.
But a lot of like videos and things that I read that sort of held the Ingenieur as a watch like collection back until that point. And I mean, obviously part of it is just because Gerald Genta is awesome, right? So if he touches it, he could just make it better. But they changed it up all the time. Like it started as kind of just this simple three-hander and it just changed drastically.
Mhm.
And then it went away for so long, right? It went away for I don't know, for what, like 25 years. So it's yeah, I don't know. Just kind of weird that they've tossed it around. I hope that's why I hope that they keep it. But more on
Yeah.
that later. So and then yeah, finally to wrap up the 70s here. Sorry, I had 20 years worth of history there. IWC achieved one more milestone in 1978 by developing the first titanium bracelets. So another material innovation underscored their commitment to pushing boundaries in both design and functionality, but also technology and development as well.
Yeah, and later the brand sought substantial venture capital, facilitated by the Swiss Brand Corporation. The company connected with VDO Adolf Schindling AG, which acquired a major interest in 1978. The strategic partnership not only secured IWC's financial stability, but also marked a turning point in the corporate structure. Yeah, in 1985, the new director, Gunter Blumen, pushed for rapid implementation of plan changes. He also put in the existing advertising campaign to work, built up the customer base, and solidified IWC's financing. Also in 1985, Gunter asked Kurt Kloss to create a grand complication watch to be worn on a wrist, as the only iterations of this were really a much larger size pocket watch. The IWC Reference 3770 launched in 1990 and was the first wristwatch-sized grand complication that housed a chronograph, a minute repeater, and a perpetual calendar function. In 1991, Gunter founded the LMH Group with its headquarters in Schaffhausen, with 100% stake in IWC, 60% stake in Jaeger-LeCoultre, and the other 40% of that 60 was actually owned by AP at the time, and then a 90% stake in a Saxon-based watchmaking company called Elongation, which most people should know what that is as well. If not, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it soon.
Alanga, yes. Yeah, and in July of 2000, LMH was acquired by Reichmont for 2.8 billion Swiss francs. Despite the takeover by Reichmont, IWC, however, was guaranteed that they would continue being managed by the same executive staff. But only in 2005, after their acquisition, did they finally make their move to in-house movements as well. And then later in 2011, IWC released other grand complication watches. So again, did innovate off of those back from the 90s. However, these took like 10 years to develop, so was a very long time. But remember, all of this moving, all of this mismanaged or not mismanagement, but at least back and forth management. So again, in 2011, that was a grand complication that took 10 years to develop, was finally released. That watch has a celestial chart with sunrise, sunset indications customized for each customer based on their individual locations, which is pretty amazing. Another really cool thing that they do with some of their perpetual calendars is actually provide you with additional date wheels so that the watch can continue working after the new millennium, which is crazy. Finally, in 2023, like we kind of hinted at just a moment ago, or at least provided some context around, International Watch Company launched the Ingenieur Automatic 40 in four colors. Black, there's kind of like this blue, sort of teal turquoise type of a color. It's actually kind of more like a seafoam, black, gray, and then I believe white. All newly engineered automatic models following that Gerald Genta sort of code of design from the 70s. So, with that, that wraps up history and ready to jump into your
Yeah.
first watch here? Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of just jumping away from the pilot watches that IWC is known for. Again, when you think of IWC, you think they're hardcore, perfect pilot watches, followed up by the Portuguese, and but the Portofino is what I want to talk
Mhm.
about today, which is their dressy version of really I don't even know what type of watch you would say this is, other than obviously the one I want to talk about specifically is a perpetual calendar. I mean, it's just a beautiful dress watch, rose
Yeah.
gold, yellow gold, 18 karat. This watch released in April of 2023, so very new. Um, with case thickness of 11.7 millimeters, water resistance of 50 meters. This runs on their movement caliber 32150 with 4 hertz, 28,800 beats per hour, and a power reserve of 72 hours. I know we've talked about in the past about how some of these power reserves have been very
Oh
disappointing
my
lately,
god.
but IWC, I think on all of the watches we're going to discuss today, have very nice,
IWC
72
are
hour plus water power reserve.
IWC is bringing a whole new angle to the movement game. So yeah, I'm really
Hmm.
excited to talk about that.
Hmm.
Yep.
So this watch again, 72 hours while also running a day date, a moon phase, open case back. I mean, it's a perpetual calendar with 72 hours. There's not a whole lot
Yeah.
of watch brands that have that time reserve. This watch again has a blue second hand running off the gold hour indices, a white dial, with the perpetual calendar moon phase all being at the 12 o'clock, and then the chronograph and the month counter is all at the 6 o'clock. So very pretty watch. Again, the reason I picked this, I know Brett's going to talk about another watch that I really love as well here later. Kind of spoiler, but it's the Portugieser Perpetual Calendar. This watch is just, I don't want to say a much more affordable, but a much less costing version of that to me. Which is why I think for my money, this would probably be the way I go. Looking at pictures
Yeah.
of it, I mean, they have it all different types of styles. This watch is coming around $20,000 versus the Portugieser, I think, 40. So you're pretty much
Hmm.
half the price of the other one. So that's again why I kind of like this watch. I chose this watch. It brings everything that I would want that the Portugieser does as well, but it just does it at a little bit smaller scale. But still, it doesn't feel like it's lacking in any quality.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It definitely I don't know if you happen to stumble across them doing any research, but it really looks like a pocket watch, sort of like a
Hmm.
layout. Like, there's
Yeah.
very like elongated, markers on it.
Yep,
And,
just like a pocket, which again, we were saying
yeah,
IWC has a
that's
very big history of,
yeah.
pocket watches,
Yeah.
and,
So that first one you said, I think with the five, no, the 3770, yeah,
mhm,
was the first wristwatch size grand
mhm,
complication. That one did have, excuse me, that one did house a chronograph. This one, what do we have? You said moon phase, and then what is outside of the moon phase? Is there another complication outside of that? Oh, so that okay. So it's the moon phase, and then it's the day of the week,
date, yeah,
and then there's the month
the day, so it has the
and day of
day-date
the month.
function as yeah,
That's on a second way. Okay,
mhm.
got it. I can only see a little scribbling. I had to blow that
Yeah,
picture up.
you had to
Yeah.
blow it up, yeah.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we just talk about the Portugieser next?
Yeah,
We don't
let's
we,
do it.
we don't have to skip the complete calendar here yet. But yeah, let's just talk
Yeah,
about them side by side, and then we
go
can
ahead
kind
and
of
let's
compare and
go
contrast.
ahead and talk about the Portugieser, and let's kinda compare
Okay.
some of the specs.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. We just said a moment ago, this watch, second one, going to be the IWC Portugieser Perpetual calendar. So we've got a lot going on with this watch. This is going to be 18 karat gold, or I'm sorry, 18 karat rose gold, 44.2 millimeter case diameter. So
Big.
again, perpetual calendar, we're fitting a lot of complications into this. So it is going to be quite large and
So
also a little bit thick.
you're talking I'm trying to look here. How did I not put I believe the Portofino is 40 to 41, so you're talking,
Hmm.
fairly bigger size watch, but of course, like you
Yeah.
said, you got to add a little bit more to the dial.
Yeah, yeah. So on this dial, and actually, before I run down the spec list, let me just explain the differences of the complications, since we kind of just went over the other one. So again, here at the 12 o'clock, you're going to have the moon phase, and then at the 6 o'clock, you're going to have a wheel that indicates the month of the year.
Mhm.
And I assume that that is a jumping, that's a jumping
Yes,
hand,
it
not
is.
a progressing
And
hand.
you also have the year.
Yes, yes. So to the left of that, effectively between the 8 and the 7, you have the year, and that's on a. Um, I don't know. Wait,
Imagine what
actually,
you would
that has
see.
to be on a single. That has to be on a wheel that's
Yeah.
rotating 1 year at a time, because there's not going to be a 25 stacked above it that falls down. There's just going to be a 5 that falls down and a 6. So
Mhm.
that's another set of wheels inside. Then at the 9 o'clock, actually, sorry, you were going to say something about the date.
I was gonna say, yeah, imagine like what you would have as a date window, but that instead of being the date window is a year window, and instead of
Mm,
being at the 3 is right in between the 8 and the 7.
yep,
Again,
and
we'll
and
post
again,
pictures of these.
yeah, and again, it's a full 4-digit year, so
Yeah.
2024 in this case. And then at the 9 o'clock, On an inner ring, on an inner hand, you have small seconds, and then on an outer ring, you have the day of the week. And then at the 3 o'clock, again, you have a sort of a double complication there. On the inner ring, you have a power reserve indicating up to 7 days. Yes, 168 hours. I mean, shitting on people with their power reserves.
Yeah.
I looked at JLC because JLC, they make, I mean, to me, they're kind of like the entry level, like master, or they're the masters
Oh
of
yeah.
like entry level perpetual calendars
Yeah.
with the Master Ultra Thin collection. And for reference, I looked up that power reserve last night. It's 34 hours or 36 hours, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's true kind of across the board. You look at a lot of these really, really high end
They're normally
grand
under 2 days.
complications. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're usually under 40 or less. So
Yeah.
yeah, really impressive to see all of this packed in. One more kind of subtle difference, I guess, about this watch um, compared to the Portofino, or I guess two. The first being that this one does have rose gold applied numerals that go around the dial. And so those are going to be cut off, in certain sections, namely at the 12. The 12 is about halfway missing, and then the 6 is completely missing, as well as the 3 and the 9 completely missing.
Yeah,
And
I
then
mean
this,
this watch to me is again my if I'm just like picking looks, I love
mhm,
this watch. This is probably my favorite just look wise. There is one gripe that is not just this watch, is a lot of these watches that I personally is a very personal thing, so
okay.
you might not care. But you know how my watch, the Portofino, has a second hand, a true second hand. I don't I love a true second hand.
Okay.
This watch
You
has
do.
the second hand in the sub dial at the 9 position.
Yep.
So, you know, you only have
It's got
the
a
hour
small
and the minute
seconds.
hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So me just look wise and just being able to watch a second hand go around so easily versus having to
Mm,
look in a sub dial, I just like that personally. If I had to find a gripe, and that's just me looking for a gripe, that would be my one gripe on the whole watch.
got it. Okay. Yeah. I can respect that because yeah, I don't mind that it has a small seconds, but I'm kind of right there with you.
If
Like,
you could prefer one, yeah,
yeah,
like I said, it
if
wouldn't
you're
stop me from
looking for it,
buying it, but yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, like if you're looking for it and and it's hard to gauge,
Mhm.
or something like that. But and I kind of wondered that when we did AP on self plug to our last episode on Audemars Piguet, but we
Yep.
talked about the Royal Oak Jumbo, and there's no second hand on that. It's kind of really the first watch that we've really covered on the show
Yeah.
that just by default just has no second hand. But
Yeah, and
nonetheless,
the reason we covered AP last episode, and or the reason I did not cover a flying tourbillon in this episode was because I did in the last episode. But there are
ah,
some very cool tourbillons that IWC makes as well.
yeah, yeah, there definitely are some in this collection here, I believe too.
Yeah,
So to round out the spec list for the Portugieser Perpetual Calendar, again, 18 karat rose gold, 44.2 millimeter case diameter, 14.9 millimeter case thickness. Water resistance of 30 meters with the in-house caliber 52611. Again, similar to the Portofino, beating at 4 hertz. This one, however, with a 7-day power reserve of 168 hours, which is pretty incredible, and then a cost of 43,400. Again, it is rose gold.
yeah,
I think it's one of the more beautiful watches that we've covered.
definitely.
At least aesthetically, it reminds me a lot of a Breitling Datora, just in
Yeah,
the styling, and that's one of my favorite Breitlings. We covered those watches on our Breitling episode. I covered that watch specifically, so it's a design that I love. It's a timeless design when it comes to grand complications and things like that. It's again, we talked about the power reserve, ultra impressive. And then the last thing I'll mention, I mentioned it earlier in the history, but again, this is the watch I was saying. They send you the additional date wheels in wax paper so that you hand this watch down to, your kid, and then eventually to your grandkid, and so on. And eventually it needs the 3000 date wheel. So they are assuming that this thing goes on for, or I'm sorry, it's not going to be 1,000, but hundreds of years. So they send
yeah.
you additional wheels so that it can run hundreds of years. My only knock on it, though, was it's a little bit expensive
Hmm.
relative to kind of the rest of the market surrounding it. So the JLC perpetual calendars in gold, for example, sell for the
Yeah,
same or less, actually. They do have vastly better proportions as well. So it's, back to the topic, that we started off with. Those watches are going to be in, I believe, 40, 39 and 40 millimeter
Mhm.
um, dimensions, and then probably going to be a more accurate caliber too. So if that's something that you're considering, because IWC amazing in-house calibers, but most are not going to be COSC certified. Not a big deal to most people, but just in case, and just a little bit of comparison there outside of the brand. But yeah, two amazing dress watches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, again, and that was again mine. Not, I don't want to say knock, but one of the reasons I chose my watch was just the price is still expensive at $20,000 to $23,000 depending on what you do.
Yeah.
But it's similar. It's their, in the watch again. The Portofino is their smallest perpetual calendar made by IWC in Schaffhausen.
Got it.
And with
I
only a lug to lug of 45 millimeters, it's a very rounded bubble profile, and honors their history of the pocket watch, exactly like you
Yeah.
brought mentioned.
Oh yeah. 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 I mean, it just is kind of like one look at it, and it looks very, very old school vintage pocket watch.
Yeah.
Um, I do get the sense, I don't know if you did, but I do kind of get the sense that, I mean, the the Big Pilot and the Mark 20, those are not so much in this category, but IWC is a fucking expensive brand.
Yeah.
Like
They're
they're
not, yeah.
pricey,
They're
you
not a
know?
small brand. I mean, that's why
No.
they are a very, up there price wise with Rolex and
Yeah.
the big ones. They're not down there with, Tudor. And they're
Yeah.
a very expensive brand, and that's why to me, like, I've liked the look of a lot of IWCs, and that would be something, that'd be a watch I would want to buy one day, just to be like, because I know the history of it, I know
Mhm.
the quality of it. But it's hard to justify that being one of your first five watches you buy, with it being $10,000 to $20,000 for any of
Yeah.
their nice ones. Again, you can get a Mark 20 for, I think, around 5 to 6 thousand, and maybe that would be what I
Mhm.
would have to do just to step off, which might be what I would want to do, depending on what I finally decide to be
'Cause
the
that is the most
crazy
iconic.
dress watch. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, if you're gonna get an IWC, why would you not get a pilot watch? If you're only
Yeah.
gonna get one, why would you
Exactly,
not get
yeah.
a pilot's watch? Leans us right over to the Mark series.
Yeah.
Again, it started with the Mark 11, which was originally made for the Royal Air Force navigators for them to use on their planes, and then the Mark 18 came out in 2016, and that was their best seller for half a decade. I mean, just, it had a few gripes, was a little big for people's liking. Again, like I was saying, the Portofino, I think, had a lug to lug of 45 millimeters. I think that one was like 55 or like 6. It was a bigger watch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so then they finally came out really very low key, especially for their most popular brand. You hear about a Submariner coming out, it's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
But the Mark 20 came out in 2022, and they really just critiqued a lot of those critics. When
Yeah.
it comes to smaller lug to lug width, they have a screw down crown to help with water resistance. I think the Mark 18, I might be wrong, but I believe was 60 meters water resistance. This is now 100 meters. And then what I really like, and I know Brett will be ecstatic about this, on their leather straps, they now have a quick release on their factory leather straps.
Give us
So
quick release by default.
exactly. So, bro, when I read that, I said, "Oh gosh, here we go. I got to bring this up. He'll love it." And again, it's a very cool watch. It reminds me of a lot of the Breitling watches I've worn. I mean, the Aviator, the Avenger that I was wearing is on our Instagram and TikTok now. Um, it has a plane on the background. It's very aviation centric. Same thing with this watch, obviously. On the case back has an engraved plane. Very much honors their history. And again, this is their watch. When you think of IWC, a lot of people think of the Mark series. And of course, Mark 20 again came out in 2022, stainless steel, 40 millimeters. So they brought down that lug width, case thickness of only 10.8 millimeters, which is pretty thin if you think about it. Their caliber movement of 32,111, and vibrations again is 4 hertz, 28,800 beats per hour. And again, an astounding, for what it is, a simplistic watch, an astounding 120-hour power reserve. So you think about, again, Submariners and their most simplistic type of watch like that. For Rolex, they're going to be around 72 hours power reserve. So
Yeah.
you're jumping all the way up to 120. And the cost variation here is again very good. I mean, it's pretty expensive if you think about the simplicity of what the watch is. But
Yeah.
again, if you're like, hey, I can get the most popular. You know, I can get the Submariner of this watch brand if you like this watch brand for 5,200 to $6,000. That's a heck of a
Yeah.
lot better than buying a Submariner for $10,000, and it really is just a dive watch. It has no special functions, and this movement is probably, I hate to say it, but better than the Oyster Perpetual movement that Rolex has.
So you know what thought I just had is kind of funny because Bell and Ross was one of our
Hmm.
not so successful episodes. Let me just say, let's just put it lightly. And but I was just reading this and thinking, you're talking about the cost of, and like 5K being a little bit pricey for like what you're getting. And then I was thinking like, oh yeah, Bell and Ross was really expensive too. And I remember
Yeah,
having that thought because for being such a small brand, like
yeah,
I guess I don't I'm not shocked that IWC is expensive. Doesn't mean that I kind of expected them to be this pricey, but Bell and Ross definitely was. And the thought I had
yeah.
was like, man, this is just because they're freaking pilots watches.
Hmm.
It's because they're pilots watches and
Money.
money. Pilots got money. If you're a
Yeah,
professional pilot, you're making a lot of money. And if you're a pilot, just like in your spare time, you got a lot of money to spend on hobbies. That's why these watches are so
yeah.
damn expensive.
Well, and it's funny because I even wrote in my notes here. I was like, "Hey, if I'm spending 5 to 6 thousand on a watch, much rather spend 5 to 6 thousand on IWC than a Bell and Ross."
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. Get you a big pilot. I'm shocked that the pictures that you used. I'm
Hmm.
shocked you didn't want to go strap for either one.
Yeah, well, I thought about it. Those were the two that
Okay.
were on their website.
Oh, okay. Okay. Do
Yeah,
you
so
prefer the bracelet or the strap?
I would probably,
Because the
I
strap is like icon, like that, like the
yeah,
OG one. It was the big black
I
strap
was
that fits over
thinking,
the pilot's
yeah,
suit.
I was thinking bracelet to start off, but then once later I did research after putting these pictures in, and now I'm, especially after the quick release, I'm like, dang, that strap does look pretty good.
Yeah,
So
it's cool.
I'm wafting back and forth.
It's a watch that like if you put it on, man, it's just that's like a personality watch too. It's like
Hmm.
if you wear a leather strap, because it's not like crocodile leather. It's like it's
Yeah.
pilot leather.
Oh yeah.
It's like if you wear a leather,
Functional
um,
leather. Yeah.
yeah, and it's got they still use that traditional. I'm sure it served a purpose back in the day, but just the little styling bit, the little two
Yeah.
circular, little metal dots on either end of the case.
Hmm.
Um, that's attached to the strap, obviously. So it's got this whole like vibe to it. You just walk in kind of feeling like a badass. You need like the
Yeah.
pilot jacket with like the faux fur,
Yeah.
inside of it. Go ahead.
Now let's talk about the watch where I could show you a picture of it and say, "Guess who made this watch?" And I could give you two
Exactly.
guesses. You only need one though.
Yep, exactly. So we're gonna finish up our four watches today, talking about the IWC Ingenieur 40. So the Ingenieur, French for the English word engineer, was originally released in 1955 with the Ingenieur reference 666, and then in
Jesus.
19 right?
What, yeah. What the heck?
Did you say Jesus?
Yeah.
Yes, 1967 with the Gerald Genta design. That was the Ingenieur.
1976.
Or yes, I'm sorry, 1976. Dyslexic. With the Gerald Genta design, that was the Ingenieur SL line.
Yeah.
I believe that stands for sports line, I believe.
Okay.
2023, as we mentioned earlier, with the new Ingenieur 40. So stainless steel case material this go around, no more titanium. 40 meters, as the name suggests, 10.7 meters on the case thickness. So very, very thin watch. 100 meters
All
of
these
water.
are.
Yeah, yep. 100 meters of water resistance is going to do you just fine. This has the caliber 32111. That is the same that is in the Mark 20 that we
Yep.
just finished talking about. And so the specs again are the same: 4 hertz, 120 hours of power reserve. So the only downside of those, like I mentioned earlier, is that they're not cost. However, many of the reviews that you see, I think because these are in-house but not COSC certified, I think a lot of reviewers actually do take the time to time graph the watch and then report that, and everything has been pretty well regulated. So I don't
Mm.
think that that's even anything to even worry about with these. But again, worth noting that it's the same movement that's going into the pilot's Mark 20 watch.
Yeah.
The difference here, and this is where things,
Jesus.
this is where things start to take a turn.
Yeah.
This watch costs $11,600, and there's a couple of bits of information that you need to know alongside that number. Um, it's obviously expensive. It's basically 2x the cost of the Mark 20. It has the same exact movement. obviously the integrated bracelet costs a lot more to make. That's just a known thing, right? Um, and but in addition to that cost, you have to put down a deposit at an IWC boutique. So you can't walk into an AD, like your local AD that sells IWC and do this. You have to go to an IWC boutique. The wait list is a year or longer. And like I said, you have to put, I believe it's a 20% deposit down. So 20% down for a watch that just came out that costs $11,000, that has no COSC movement. I was talking about the downside about that earlier because I feel like in, Longines, we've talked about that like at length, and I'm just tired of having the conversation and being that guy about it. But at this cost, it does strike me as like a little odd. At
Mr.
5,000, I don't
Genta
really.
must be getting some commission that they got to
Yeah.
pay him.
Yeah. Yeah, the Genta estate is raking in the commissions here because yeah, again, I just, I think at 5K that's fine. It's whatever. But I mean, if you're
Yeah,
charging people that, I would just I would just hope. But probably nothing to worry about. So that's kind of the only thing, is that it's just a very expensive watch, but it's the first reissue of the Genta designed Ingenieur. It's a beautiful watch. It looks, I mean, if and when you see it in pictures on the wrist, it looks amazing. Like it
yeah,
never looks bad. The colors that they chose, they're simple, but they work, and that aqua, that kind of fun, more out there color is really, really nice too. The dial pattern is very unique. It takes on that tapisserie sort of, inspiration, let's call it, from the AP Royal Oak. And then similarly with the Nautilus, all Genta designed, of course. Um, so yeah, what do you think about it, like aesthetically, or like the cost? Like
I mean,
what
I
jumps out at you about this watch?
that it looks like a Royal Oak, but then I figured out who made it and said, "Oh, okay, that makes sense."
Yeah,
I mean, I like it. I wouldn't buy it if I was gonna buy an IWC. I mean, the dial is very cool. I do like the dial,
yeah.
like the checkerboard dial. But I mean,
Somebody said it kind of looks like the
11,600.
American flag.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
I would pay, like I said, 5 to 8 tops was what this watch should probably be priced for, but again,
yeah.
I'm sure they have some royalty that they're having to pay the estate, seriously. I mean, I said it jokingly, but I'm serious, they probably do,
Yeah,
and that's probably why they, gotta get 20%. I mean, they act like this is their royal o there's many better watches that you could find IWC for probably even that price or less,
right.
but, I mean, it looks like
It looks the part
it
to
looks
me.
like a Patek and a Royal Oak had a baby, if that makes sense. It's a little more bubbly and rounded like a Patek, but it also
Hmm.
looks like the Royal Oak in other ways. Like the dial looks like a Royal Oak.
Exactly.
It really looks like their little
the
kid, the
the
kid.
bracelet is
Yeah.
Nautilus inspired, and then the
Yep.
case and the bezel and the dial
Is
is
Royal Oak.
Royal Oak inspired. Yeah, it's
It's
very
their
much.
it's their
Uh,
bastard child
yeah,
for
yeah,
that still thinks they're worth a lot.
yeah. That's the thing to me is, I mean, I mean, we can just call a spade, right? I mean, this is just a company taking advantage of the hot new trend, integrated steel sports watch. I don't have any problem with them pricing it
Mm.
like that. And obviously, there's a wait list, and people want them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing. At the end of the day, does it suck for like the everyman consumer, like you and I? Does it suck that it's not $7,000 or $9,000 watch that we can, maybe just wait a month or two for, like, like a
Yeah.
Tudor, like Chrono, for example, something that's you're kind of barely waiting, it's kind of in
Yeah.
demand, but it's kind of not. Should we, deserve that? I mean, probably, but I'm not mad at them. They obviously knew what the market was looking for, and I think because they priced it at that, like, again, they just jumped that price up so much. I almost kind of look at it now like, I said it earlier, but it's almost like the Mark 20 is the only cheap watch in the family, really.
Yeah.
The IWC is a more expensive brand, but now I think because of that, I almost see this watch as like this is the entry into the integrated steel sports watch luxury category.
Yeah.
Like if that's your sort of ambition as a collector, if your end of life grail is 5711, or an AP Royal Oak jumbo or something, or one of these grand complications, this could be like the watch that you get when like you're 30 or 35 instead. That is the kind of, jumpstart to that final destination. I see it from a collector perspective like that. Are people going to do that? Do people see it the same way? I don't know. That's up to them to decide. But strictly from like from a long collecting journey, I think this kind of has a place in the market actually, because it is that luxury. It's not the Tissot PRX, right? Like I have a PRX. I think it's pretty fucking cool, but
Yeah.
it's a $600 watch, right? Like, it's a cool design. And this one I think is maybe it's special, we'll see in
Yeah.
2 or 3
And as
years.
long as there's a wait period, they're gonna go over asking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't even think to even look aftermarket, just
I,
so
I
busy
am
with
right now.
everything.
It's 14 to 17,000.
Okay. There you go. So, yeah, 15 to 20K roughly for one of these aftermarket. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's truth to it. Again, in 2 or 3 years, I think we'll know. We'll have a long enough runway to tell, like, is this kind of getting up there with some other watches in the that kind of attainable luxury,
Yeah.
discussion too. But I think it definitely has its place today, at least. So,
Yeah.
yeah, man,
Well, great episode. I mean, this is again, IWC is a great company. They're
I like their
expensive,
stuff.
but they're worth the expensiveness that maybe some other pilot companies. But like, I mean, I don't want to trash on Bell and Ross because they definitely have some cool things. They're a newer
Yeah,
company. I mean, so it's Richard Mill. They're on that newer company side. But again, like we said, if you're looking just for a pilot's watch, I would be more likely to go IWC than I would Bell and Ross. And again, the history's there. They've been around for a while. They have some very cool watches, and we'll keep an eye on them.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do like them. I thoroughly enjoyed this. And I think it's a brand. There's a 50-50 shot when we cover a brand that neither one of us really know anything about. There's a 50-50 shot that we love it or that we kind of hate it, and we're just like,
Yeah.
Sorry,
I,
I was
I
I
feel
was
like
making
the
like a stink
episode.
face over
I
here
feel
on
like the
camera.
episode's kind of, and by the end of the episode, you really feel like, okay, they actually enjoyed this brand. All right, they really did not like this brand.
Yeah,
They're just talking shit about
yeah,
it. And halfway through the episode, we start talking about,
yeah,
another watch brand.
yeah. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, there's a AD right down the same AD that carries IWC. It's like the only one kind of close to me, and they used to carry Omega, and
Yeah.
that was my only spot to go see those two watches. And so every
Yeah.
time I go in there, I see some really cool used IWCs. That's another cool thing, is like, because there's so many of these like special edition pilot watches for obviously special
Hmm.
pilot commemorative things. And so if you go to like a place that carries used ones, you always find some cool shit, some like
Yeah.
one-off references. So yeah, encourage you guys to check it out. But have a great rest of the week. David and I are we're here. We're not letting go of you guys. We're just considering what to do in the long run. So let us know. Give us some feedback if you guys have ideas or questions, support. If you just are generally just curious, like, how do you support us? Hit us up. And if you've got if there's any small business owners out there that would like to approach us for sponsorship, we're happy to sit down, discuss with you, demographics, listenership and audience size and all of that good stuff. We've got plenty of detail that we can go into. So yeah, if you're into that, willing, able, think that co-marketing is a good idea, hit us up. And if not, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for an episode on Omega.
Omega.
James Bond, little flair to it. So
Yeah.
peace.